So we're told in First Samuel that when Samuel became old, he made his sons judges over Israel. So they were to take their father's place, and the judges were to continue. The name of his firstborn son was Joel, and the name of his second, Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba. Yet his sons did not walk in his ways, but turned aside after gain. Some of the translations say after lucre, after money. They took bribes and perverted justice. But look here from a couple days ago, First Samuel 3. This is God talking to Samuel when God wakes Samuel up at night by calling his name. God says, "For I told him," meaning Eli, "that I would judge his family forever because of the sin he knew about. His sons blasphemed God, and he failed to restrain them, or he hasn't disciplined them." Restrain is the word that seems to be used. Here we have rebuke. He did not rebuke them. In other words, we're seeing a sort of a repetition. Spider-Man and I are seeing a repetition of a pattern. You had Eli, who seemed to be devout and serious about God. He knew enough to give Samuel the right advice when Samuel was being called. But his two sons were misbehaving. They were uh, desecrating the sacrifices. And Eli did the wrong thing. He didn't do what a father should do. He didn't restrain, rebuke, or discipline his sons. Now, here we find out that when Samuel becomes an old man, his own two sons, like Eli's two sons, are scoundrels. They're bad guys. They're interested only in money. Now, we are not told overtly that this is the fault of Samuel, who did not rebuke them. But as we'll see tomorrow, people approach Samuel to say something to these kids, and he doesn't. Now, I think this is something that's tied together. This is a theme that I think has more to do with God and our relationship with God and his relationship with us than it does simply have to do with Eli and Samuel. I think it's this. The right thing for Eli to have done would have been to discipline Hophni and Phinehas, to rebuke them, to restrain them. The right thing for Samuel to have done when his sons grow up to be scoundrels before they're adults is to rebuke them, restrain them, discipline them. Because that's how love is expressed, particularly from a father to a son. That's the sort of discipline that is usually the father's job. A mother can do it too, but it's typically dad who does that. Now, God is our Father in heaven. God to us is not like Eli was to Hophni and Phinehas, or Samuel was to Joel and Abijah. God does the right thing. He cares for us and loves us enough that it's tough love. So if we start going astray the way Hophni and Phinehas did, the way Joel and Abijah did, God rebukes us somehow. This is why when we're reading in Isaiah, all of God's people have been allowed to be taken captive into Babylon. And second, Isaiah is lamenting this. In other words, God punishes when the punishment is meant as a rebuke, as a way to try to train and correct us. God is not Eli. God is not Samuel. And they were both good men in their own ways, but they failed when it came to their children. But God doesn't fail when it comes to us. So the next time you are suffering, perhaps it's a rebuke, or it's a restraint, or it's a correction from God. And don't forget, with great power comes great responsibility. But that's kind of beside the point.